The great thing about being a Unitarian Universalist minister is that your source text can be a Bruce Lee quote. There's this famous quote by the martial arts phenom Bruce Lee. You must be shapeless, formless, like water. When you pour water in a cup, it becomes the cup. When you pour water in a bottle, it becomes the bottle. When you pour water in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Water can drip and it can crash. Become like water, my friend. Now, and he spoke of this, he was speaking of the martial art of Kung Fu and channeling energy with flow. Or was he? Actually, this notion comes from East Asian philosophy, specifically from Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher and best-known author of the Daodejing, known as the Book of the Way. The central idea of the Daodejing is if one observes the Tao, the way, and submits to the natural flow of energy in the universe, then one will be at peace. The religion of Taoism, which advocates adherence to the universal Tao, the way, was practiced even before Lao Tzu wrote the book. It was practiced through ancestor worship and an acknowledgement of the natural law of the Tao, moving, flowing in all things. And in chapter 8 of the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu did write, "The supreme goodness is like water. It benefits all things without contention. In dwelling, it stays grounded. In being, it flows to depths. In expression, it is honest. In confrontation, it stays gentle. In governance, it does not control. In action, it aligns to timing. It is content with its nature and therefore cannot be faulted." Now, water has many natures, but one is especially to be adaptive, carving out canyons from rock, becoming gas or vapor, turning to ice and melting back down again. Humans, too, are adaptive creatures, as are most animals, who adapt beautifully in millions of different ways to environmental changes or threats in order to support their own survival. Now, it's important not to be flippant about this concept of adaptation, as though giving voice to it makes it easy. The writer Damien Barr observed on Twitter this last week, "We are all in the same storm. We are not all in the same boat." And he's right. Some of us are in yachts, and some have just the one oar. We cannot pretend that all of our adaptations are the same level of difficulty or even the same level of necessity. Some of us are adapting to staying home more, while others are adapting to suddenly struggling to cover both the rent and food. Some are adapting to ordering groceries instead of going shopping, while others are adapting to losing family members and loved ones. Some are adapting to not being able to go to the gym, while others are forced to adapt to surviving abusive situations inside their home. Nor can we ignore that entire cultures, countries, and societies have had to adapt to survive continually, while others are only just now facing this imperative. An article in last week's Washington Post laid bare the differences in our experiences, which are particularly stark in our own state of Georgia, which was the article's focus. Writes Rachel Weiner, "Due to occupational segregation, Black Americans have often been disproportionately represented in industries that face the greatest risks of known hazards, such as COVID-19. Research shows black workers were more likely to be employed in essential services than white workers. And this disparity is even clearer when you look at the healthcare industry. The businesses that choose to reopen now under Governor Kemp's new order, forcing employees to give up unemployment benefits and go back to work in close proximity to the public, well, they are more likely to have black employees than the businesses that are still operable via telecommuting. As the journalist Amanda Mull observes, it is an experiment with human guinea pigs. Georgia's brash reopening puts much of the state's working class in an impossible bind. Risk death at work or risk ruining yourself financially at home. Georgians are now the largely unwilling canaries in the invisible coal mine, sent to find out just how many individuals need to lose their job or their life for a state to work through a plague. And once again, black people and other communities of color in Georgia will be the most vulnerable. Says Georgia State University Harry Hyman, "We are opening up businesses that are not only high touch and require close proximity, but we're also choosing industries where racial and ethnic minority communities are disproportionately represented. Choosing to restart these industries is likely to deepen the crisis for communities of color across the South." Said Hyman, "They are going back to a job that places them at risk for exposure to coronavirus, and they don't have access to Medicaid because we haven't expanded it." These are devastating, traumatizing realities. This situation in Georgia, where a study found more than 80% of hospitalized COVID patients are African American, is a moral outrage. Friends, if there is a God, she is angry. So when we talk about adapting, we need not row our own boats alone. Instead, we can become what the columnist Peggy Noonan refers to as a big, crazy armada with millions of people throwing and catching millions of lifelines, which I suppose is how a lot of us tend to see this country of deep inequalities and glittering possibilities. Millions of lifelines thrown out to sea in the storm we are all weathering together. Remember that Bruce Lee quote, which was really about how we harness our energy. Water can drip and water can crash. There are things we must adapt to, and we are adapting to these new realities, whether with resignation or with energy and openness, we are doing it. Keith Yamashita is a tech industry thought leader. And his creative technology company, well, they're creating a lot of inspiring content for organizational leaders during this pandemic. Keith and his team are beginning to understand all the world as traumatized now. He guesses we are probably past the denial phase of our trauma and we are entering into the reckoning phase. Keith has been thinking about this because 2 years ago he suffered a stroke. And in trying to recover from that stroke, he discovered a really profound personal truth in his recovery process. We don't have to settle for post-traumatic stress. We don't have to settle for post-traumatic stress as our best possible outcome. If we focus on the period of moving through the trauma and we focus our lives somewhere beyond, we can use this as a time of post-traumatic growth, trying to achieve some kind of renewal, he says, or a new kind of human flourishing on the other side. It's not the life we wanted. It's not the life we wished for. It's certainly not the life we planned, but it is rich and deep and meaningful and important. The poet David Whyte believes the questions that can unmake or make a life are those we have long avoided, those questions that have no right to go away. And maybe as we seek resilience in this time, maybe now is the time to ask those questions. The questions that have no right to go away, according to David Whyte, the poet, are those that have to do with the person we are about to become. They are conversations that will happen with or without our conscious participation. They always have something to do with how we might become someone more generous, more courageous, more present, more dedicated. And they have something to do with timing, he says. When we might step through the doorway into something bigger and better, both beyond ourselves and yet more of ourselves at the same time. Okay, I'm going to share with you. So David Whyte has shared what his life questions are, those questions that can unmake or make his own life. And one of the questions that he seeks to answer is, how can I drink from the deep well of things as they are? The question is, how can I drink from the deep well of things as they are? Now, David Whyte is from the west of Ireland, and in the west of Ireland, there are very old, very sacred wells everywhere. The locals call them blessed wells or holy wells. And at the wells, you can find notes to the dead, bits of ribbon, keepsakes people have left when they've said a prayer for someone who's sick. Often, a local church will have a mass out there by a well once a year. These holy wells are scattered across the countryside, and they're part of the local imagination, and they have been for thousands of years. And so, to David Whyte, a well, a place where the water springs eternal all year round. It's a very real, very blessed place to stop and think. And almost always, when he's struggling over a particular situation, he realizes that he's only looking at the surface of the problem. He's refusing to go for the deeper dynamic that caused all that tension in the first place. We have to deepen our understanding of this moment, make ourselves more equal to circumstances, more easy with what we have been given or not given. We must drink from the deep well of things as they are. Which means, yes, changing our ways, our little decisions, our behavior. And we are seeing adaptations everywhere in our own little boats and in our big, crazy armada. For example, we wear masks now when we go out. Even a month ago, 2 months ago, it seemed unthinkable, but this is how we love our neighbor in the time of COVID. We are learning to use new technologies, and we are creating new family traditions. My family has a new tradition of gathering on Friday nights to play trivia online and Pictionary. The way we do this, using our phones and our computers and Zoom, it's miraculous to me. And every age from age 4 to age 77 finds it thrilling to be together, to play in this way. Saturday Night Live, I don't know if you've been keeping up with them, but they are creating really funny, really clever content, all from their separate apartments with over a dozen cast members. D-Nice, the DJ, is DJing dance parties right into people's living rooms on Instagram. Comedy, musical performance, and theater are not disappearing, but they are changing. It's avant-garde, it's earnest, it's heartwarming. Intimacy is transforming into something that now requires more energy, more time and focus, and is therefore more tender, less assumed. No, you have to act upon that intimacy now. A group of old songwriter friends who were formerly in our previous life bonded over competition and mild creative wariness of each other are now learning and covering each other's songs as part of a new creative project. In Savannah, Georgia, one woman is hosting food trucks in her driveway every 4 days for her whole neighborhood. She draws chalk lines to demonstrate the physical distance required for people who come to her yard. And in my parents' neighborhood, in Tacoma Park, Maryland, there appears to be a full lineup of weekend concerts for them to attend on various neighbors' porches while they stand on the sidewalk. If I call them on a Friday or Saturday, they always have to go because there's like another concert down the street. And my dad, who's a teacher of English as a second language, he switched seamlessly to online instruction, making it possible for a police captain in Quito, Ecuador, to attend his classes. And strangely enough, a couple of almost 5-year-old twin boys who can hardly remember to put clothes on most days are incredibly skilled at social distancing and 20-second hand washing. They take this virus very seriously. My sons will ask nearby walkers to observe the 6-foot rule as we walk by them, and they sing their ABCs diligently at the sink. And if they touch a delivery box, they run inside immediately to wash their hands. And what they love to do these days is sit on the stoop and say hi to every passerby, offering compliments as they walk by. I love your shirt. That's a nice bike. They engage in long, adorable conversations with the little boy who lives next door, passing comic books over the fence and discussing Pokemon at length. On the days when I am deep in grief for all we have lost, or deep in rebellion against what is now required of me, the adaptability of my children brings me back around to hope. Yeah, it's looking backwards, as Laura Beth suggested, to our ancestors, our family stories of resilience and survival and how they formed us. And it's looking forward at the flexibility of children. Though we fret and worry so much about them, they are so adaptive. I don't know if I'm able to fully submit to the natural flow of the universe, the Tao. Some days I feel more like the stone in the middle of the rushing river than I can relate to the water's shape-shifting flow. Some days, though, we can visit those deep wells of knowing, asking those questions that have no right to go away, and in answering them, discover deeper wells of our own resilience, deeper wells of our own adaptability. We are in collective trauma right now, but maybe we can set sail towards collective post-traumatic growth, rowing in our disparate boats as one big crazy armada with millions of people throwing and catching millions of lifelines. May you be a lifeline for someone else. May you catch a lifeline. May you find the current, moving through water, adapting into whatever gets us all moving forward into the next moment, and the next one, and the one after that, beyond the horizon of our knowing. Amen. May it be so.